I'm going to present to you, dear colleagues, an overview of UNESCO designated sites and with special reference to Malaysia. And of course, we have experts from Malaysia who have been working on World Heritage, geoparks, as well as biosphere reserves. And hopefully, we can understand the global perspective. And at the same time, we can have ideas about the overall perspectives of UNESCO. So I'm going to talk about three sites, as we say, UNESCO sites. So the World Heritage Convention uh, uh, is a key convention under which there are World Heritage sites. There is Man and Biosphere Program under which there are biosphere reserves, and then UNESCO Global Geoparks, which is UNESCO Global Geopark sites as well. And of course, we have some excellent examples, including from Malaysia in all three areas. So the designated sites, why these are important? These sites encourage national governments and local communities to work together towards conservation and their sustainable use for current and future generations within and beyond the site itself. And I think this is very important for today, that it's not only within the site, but beyond as well. There are 28% of the sites of total UNESCO sites, which are World Natural Heritage sites. So there is cultural sites, there are natural sites, and there are mixed sites. So there are 28%, which are natural World Heritage sites. There are 70% of the sites are biosphere reserves. Geoparks is a new phenomena, I would say, and very critically important phenomena. And there are 2% of all sites as UNESCO Global Geoparks. So let's look into each one of these programs and sites. The first one, the World Heritage Sites, they promote the conservation of natural and cultural heritage with particular focus on the sites of outstanding universal value. The critical word to note here is outstanding universal value, which is outstanding universal value in terms of in the whole world. And there are criteria for that, which I will be highlighting to you. And the Man and Biosphere program, its focus is between sustainable human development and protection of nature, supported by research, education, and sharing of information. Then, of course, we have Professor Ibrahim Komo, one of the forefathers here for global geoparks, and we are also discussing the global geopark here as well. These are the sites which promote the importance of understanding and protecting Earth's geodiversity by actively engaging with the local communities. And I'm very pleased to see today the program is a wonderful program where you have engagement with all the players, and that's very critical. So World Heritage, let's first look into the World Heritage aspects. So for the World Heritage sites, there is World Heritage Convention, of course. There is World Heritage Committee of UNESCO, and there is World Heritage Center of UNESCO. So they are very important. The World Heritage Committee, you can imagine, is the governing mechanism for designation of sites, for the approval processes, but it's also supported by the advisory bodies such as IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, ICOMOS, and ICCROM. So ICOMOS and ICCROM focus more on the cultural side, and IUCN focuses more on the natural side. And World Heritage Center, of course, is the secretariat which is keeping these sites in terms of day-to-day queries and the processes. And of course, the World Heritage Committee, the decision body itself. World Heritage Sites, these are the World Heritage Sites around the world, 1,121, as accessed on the 9th of October 2020. And there is a link here. I will be happy to share this presentation to all colleagues if they want to go and have a look. So there are more than 1,000 properties, 1,121. 39 of them are transboundary, which means they are more across more than one countries. And also there are 53 of them in danger. So there are processes which can declare a site in danger. So you please look into the World Heritage Center for the details. There are 869 as cultural, 213 as natural, 39 are mixed, which means cultural and natural, and there are 167 state parties. So what is a state party? Malaysia is a state party. So that's a very good overview. And I encourage you, if you would like to know more, there is a wealth of information, including virtual tour of some of these sites. As I said before, the core concept of World Heritage is outstanding universal value. And that's very critical, and how we actually look into this outstanding universal value and meet at least one of the 10 selection criteria. There are operational guidelines for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention, and it's not an easy process. It really needs a lot of hard work, and the site must be of very high standard before it can be declared a World Heritage Site. So there are some principles here which I would like to highlight. So one of them is the principle of integrity, the wholeness and intactness of the natural and or cultural heritage and its attributes. So these are very carefully defined definitions in the guidelines which I mentioned to you. Authenticity, the degree to which authenticity is present in or expressed by each one of the significant attributes of a site. And also the adequate protection and management system. So there must be a clear protection and management system to make sure the integrity and or authenticity of the inscription are sustained or enhanced over time. Authenticity is not applicable to the natural heritage. So outstanding universal value, critical that the site meets the criteria, has the integrity and authenticity, and has the protection and the management plan. So that's a very high level for any site to achieve this particular recognition. So of course, in the context of Malaysia, we have Malacca and Georgetown, one of the earliest, also like Kinabalu Park, where you are today, 2000, Georgetown and Malacca, 2008, Gunung Mulu National Park, 2000, Archaeological Heritage of Lengkong Valley from 2012. So Malaysia can certainly be very proud from the World Heritage point of view, and Kinabalu Park certainly a very highly recognized place in the world. And World Heritage is not only for one country; it's for all countries, for every one of us around the world. So I would say that Malaysia is a wonderful place, and these sites are amazing places as well. These sites are very important now for what we call targeted contribution to sustainable development goals. And as you know, there are 17 sustainable development goals, and there are some goals which are directly relevant, and there are some goals which are indirectly relevant. So one of those goals is about sustainable cities and communities, and there is a special mention of a target 11.4 to strengthen efforts to protect and safeguard world's cultural and natural heritage. So very, very critical in terms of the recognition and the achievement for the sustainable development goals. So let's look into the biosphere reserves. So here I give you the reference, of course, with Kropker Range Biosphere Reserve in Malaysia. So biosphere reserves are another very special set of or network of sites. So they're internationally recognized, of course, by UNESCO's Man and Biosphere Program that includes terrestrial, marine, and coastal ecosystems. They promote solutions for reconciling the conservation of biodiversity with its sustainable use. So it's very important, this part. They're not about conservation only, but also looking into sustainable use. These are the sites for testing interdisciplinary approaches to understand and manage changes and interactions between social and ecological systems, including conflict prevention and management of biodiversity. And they provide local solutions to global challenges like biodiversity, as I'm sure you understand, is a global challenge. Climate change is a global challenge. Food security is a global challenge. There has been a lot of work which has been done to come to the point where the biosphere reserves can be designated. There is a several strategy and there is a statutory framework of the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. So it's not a convention like the World Heritage is a convention. So those people who are more interested in law, convention has a different level of recognition as compared to this particular framework, which is for voluntary cooperation guided by the MAB International Coordinating Council. So these sites have three zones. There is a core zone, which is strictly protected zone, contributes to the conservation of ecosystem, species, and genetic variation. So you can imagine there is an area which is a core zone, but this does not have to be concentric circles, as I'm sure you would understand. But this is an area which is strictly protected zone. Then there is a buffer zone which is surrounding the core zone. It is used for activities compatible with sound ecological practices that can reinforce scientific research, monitoring, training, and education. So also here you can imagine the role of the universities, research institutions, all of them play a very important role. The transition area is where communities foster socio culturally and ecologically sustainable economic and human activities. So here I would say the key thing to remember is there is protection, but at the same time sustainable development. There is an element of research, education, and training, and of course ecotourism, tourism, and recreation. So conservation contributes to the conservation of the landscapes, ecosystem, species, and genetic variation. Development fosters economic and human development through socio-cultural and ecologically sustainable practices. Like, for example, there can be special kind of honey which can be produced in an area, or there can be ecotourism, there can be better type of cropping systems, food systems. They provide a very important mechanism for research, training, and monitoring, international networking, information exchange, and they deal with the global issues of conservation and development. So the MAP strategy is in place from 2015 to 2025. It supports the member states to conserve biodiversity, enhance ecosystem services, and foster sustainable use of natural resources. There has been a concept of sustainability science, and many colleagues from Malaysia have contributed to that, including with Malaysia UNESCO Cooperation Program, how we bring social sciences and natural sciences together to move towards a sustainable society. And that's where, like UKM, Leicester has also played a very important role. And this is also about building capacity. I would also like to highlight that these sites have also been chosen for understanding how do we mitigate and adapt to climate change, and as well as global change, which includes land use change, which includes the population dynamics as well. So MAB network has a secretariat in Paris. There is a division of Earth and Ecological Sciences, and there is Secretary of Man and Biosphere Program. It has several regional networks, including for Africa, including for Latin America, for Europe, for Arab. Here in Asia Pacific, which is very relevant for Malaysia, there is Southeast Asian Biosphere Reserves Network. Its secretariat is with my office in Jakarta. And there are, of course, inter-regional networks, East Atlantic Biosphere Reserve Network, and IBERO MAP network. So this is a distribution of the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. 714 sites in 129 countries. 21 of them are transboundary. This is as of October 2020. So they're fairly spread across the world. And of course, in Asia Pacific, we have several of them as well. So in Malaysia, very importantly, Tasik Chini, a very wonderful site. I visited it, of course, as well. A wonderful place with a lake as well as the surrounding areas, and Orang Asali. So many interesting things happening there. And of course, Crockers Range, which is very close to you. So these are some of the examples from Malaysia, and I'm sure there would be many more with excellent expertise coming from Malaysia. The governing body as I said, International Coordinating Council of Man and Biosphere Program, MAB ICC, as we say. It consists of 34 member states, very, very active, and they are driving the program globally and bringing it locally. These sites are also contributing to SDGs. Very importantly, for SDG number 2, which is about zero hunger. So as I said, there may be important farming practices, sustainable use of the local resources for local people, and green sustainable social economic initiatives. Education, SDG number 4, which is about partnerships. It also links with UNESCO centers and associated schools. Like the example of Tasik Chini, for example, of course, it has a strong partnership with the UKM and with others too. So it's not exclusive only to one university. And they identify good practices for sustainable development. Then also for the climate change, very important. How do we observe climate change in terms of all the parameters for monitoring, mitigation, adaptation, best practices? It contributes to COP21 of Paris Agreement, and it identifies the best practices. SDG number 15 is critical. It's about life on land. And there are many things which biosphere reserves are contributing for the restoration and management of degraded ecosystem, degraded forests. Also, very importantly, is promoting those practices which can eliminate the unsustainable use of the local resources, and how can we preserve and promote species and varieties of economic and of cultural value. And SDG number 17, which is critical for today's meeting as well, how we promote local, regional, international cooperation. And that's where biodiversity, geology, as well as twinning between sites, transboundary sites, exchange of scientists, linking universities, linking different stakeholders, very critical. Now we come to UNESCO Global Geoparks. And of course, here is a beautiful picture of Langkawi, and I have the honor of being there quite a few times under the leadership of Professor Ibrahim Como. An amazing place, I would say, and certainly there should be many more like Langkawi. So UNESCO Global Geoparks, these are single unified geographical areas where sites and landscapes of international geological significance are managed with the holistic concept of protection, education, and sustainable development. So very important here is from the point of view of geological significance. Then, of course, the approach UNESCO Global Geoparks in the processes, they take a bottom-up approach. They go through the local relevant stakeholders, authorities, landowners, community groups, tourism providers, indigenous people, and local organizations. It's a wonderful program, really, bringing everyone together through a participatory approach. And this really shows firm commitment of the local communities and a strong local multiple partnership approach for public and as well as political support. And of course, development of comprehensive strategies that meet all the goals of the communities while showcasing and protecting geological heritage. Extremely, I would say, popular program. Many, I would say, communities with geological significance want to have this. Like in case of Indonesia, this particular program is managed through the Ministry of Planning, Bapanas, and they want many more of the global geoparks. So global geoparks must be protected under indigenous, local, regional, or national legislation as a preference. So law is very important for all the designations, but for this as well. And this does not imply restriction on any economic activity inside the geopark if it complies with indigenous, local, regional, and or national legislation. The designation is valid for 4 years, after which the geopark's functioning and quality is thoroughly re-examined during revalidation processes. And of course, there are statutes and operational guidelines for the global geoparks. So it has a Global Geoparks Council, which is responsible for assessing revalidated and new UNESCO Global Geopark nominations. It makes decisions on whether new applications should be forwarded to the executive board of UNESCO for the endorsement. It has a key advising role to the Director General of UNESCO on the strategy, planning, and implementation of global geoparks. It has 12 voting members of high-profile experts chosen for their proven excellence, scientific and/or professional qualifications. In addition, the council also consists of the Director General of UNESCO, the President of GGN, and the Secretary General of IUGS, and the Director General of IUCN. And of course, Langkawi, and inshallah very soon, where we are today. It also contributes to the SDGs. So in the interest of time, I will be a bit fast on the SDGs. A very important SDG for no poverty is we should also reduce disasters. And disaster risk reduction is critical part of the global geoparks through the bottom-up approach. And it helps bring resilience by reducing vulnerabilities and by looking into extreme events, shocks, and disasters. Of course, education SDG 4, SDG 5, which is related to gender for the empowerment of women, SDG number 8, which is about local economic development, including geotourism, job opportunities. And of course, SDG number 11 about cities, which may be very close and which can be associated with the sites. Goal number 12, where the global geoparks educate and create awareness about sustainable development and lifestyle. Goal number 13 on the climate change, and especially records of past climate change and how it can be used with the educational activities. And goal number 17 for the international cooperation among the global geoparks. And it brings together stakeholders from all over the world. That's really the most beautiful part of this work. So with that, I thank you, dear colleagues,